Hi, my name is Tom and welcome to my channel Integral Views. Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, has an almost permanent rabbit in the headlights look on his face. The political equivalent of Wallace and Gromit fame, and a blancmange, Keir Starmer is currently the most unpopular Prime Minister in British history, and yes, that includes Liz Lettuce Truss. All this achieved with only 15 months in office. Quite remarkable. But how did he manage this historical achievement? Let's trace Keir Starmer's career and examine how a unique set of variables coalesced to result in such an unpopular Prime Minister. Before Keir Starmer entered politics, he worked as a human rights lawyer. We're going to just look at a couple of different cases that Keir Starmer was involved in briefly. But one thing to bear in mind is that with these human rights cases, there is something called a cab rank rule. And what that means is that basically certain lawyers have to take cases as they're presented. It's kind of like as they come in, you take them. But the reality is that, for a lot of law firms, you can still select. And also, if you're in a law firm that has a certain speciality, then you're more likely to get cases along those lines. So anyway, we're going to look at a couple of cases Keir Starmer was involved in. Okay, case one that we're going to look at briefly. Keir Starmer was representing 5 asylum seekers, and he was doing so basically against the British government, and he used ECHR rules to win a case for the asylum seekers, prompting the following response from the then Home Secretary David Blunkett, who said, "Frankly, I am personally fed up with having to deal with the situation where Parliament debates issues and the judges overturn them. That's so relevant to today." Okay, case number 2. And in this case, Keir Starmer was representing an extremist Islamist group who are in Germany. And basically he was using the ECHR, again, to argue against the ban of that Islamist group in Germany. An Islamist group who is still active in the UK, by the way, and you can see an article about them here. The interesting thing about this case is that because it's overseas, the cab rank rule doesn't apply. So this seems to have been a case that Keir Starmer chose. I can't say that for sure. Maybe there are pressures in the firm. It's kind of unclear, but certainly it's an interesting one. These 2 examples show that Keir Starmer is very much involved with and has built a career out of understanding and applying the ECHR in many different ways. And human rights law in general, right? It's very relevant to today. Of course, it's not the full picture. I just picked out these examples to show Keir's understanding of and involvement with the ECHR. He did a lot of other work, such as international work against death penalty and various other things that are pro bono, so for free. But essentially, that gives a brief picture of his legal career. Now, fast forward all the way to 2024. Keir Starmer is leading the Labour Party, and they win a general election with 9.7 million votes. 9.7 million votes, which is far less than Jeremy Corbyn, who was leading the Labour Party at the time, got in 2017. He got nearly 13 million votes in 2017. And then in 2019, Jeremy Corbyn again got more votes than Keir Starmer did. He got 10 million, just over 10 million votes. So you can see that basically Keir Starmer didn't really have a huge vote count. Nevertheless, he got a majority. What do I think about this? Well, I think the British people are just so disillusioned and disappointed with our politicians who are letting us down consistently for at least a generation, that they just didn't even bother voting, basically. Nevertheless, Keir Starmer won a majority and is now a Prime Minister. By the way, did you know that Keir Starmer's father was a toolmaker?
Dad was a toolmaker.
My dad was a toolmaker.
He was skilled as a toolmaker.
Right, so he was a toolmaker.
He was a toolmaker, yeah.
Dad was a toolmaker.
My dad was a toolmaker.
And he was a toolmaker. My dad, he was a toolmaker.
My dad was a toolmaker.
A comment so often repeated that entire websites exist to track its use. And when it's uttered these days, it results in spontaneous laughter.
When I grew up, my dad was a toolmaker. He worked in a factory. It's true. My mum was a nurse, and actually we couldn't make ends meet.
A man who built his career prioritising international law over British interests made his views clear when he said that he prefers Davos to Westminster.
Let us just ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained. And, you know, it's closed and we're not having meaning. Once you get out of Westminster, whether it's Davos or anywhere else, you actually engage with people that you can see working with in the future. Westminster is just a tribal shouting place.
Ah, those pesky elected British MPs getting in the way of his naive dream of a globalist utopia. Anyway, with his preference for Davos over Westminster firmly in place, Keir Starmer rolled up his sleeves and got to work. By the way, rolling up his sleeves is another one of those phrases that has been so often repeated that it causes near-terminal cringe in anyone who happens to hear him utter it. So Kier Starmer rolled up his sleeves alongside his Fabian Society comrades, and yes, this is the Labour Party cabinet in office right now, and yes, that many of them are Fabian Society members. I've made a whole video on Fabian Society and the Labour Party, and you can find that on my channel. Their original logo was a wolf in sheep's clothing. I think that Keir Starmer is a sheep in sheep's clothing. Preference for international law and Davos over Westminster intact. Sleeves rolled up. Fabian Society comrades all around him. Keir Starmer was ready for work. And Keir Starmer did get to work immediately with as much forcefulness as he displays in this clip of him boxing.
And just try and whack it. Yes, this is good. And again. That's it. And again. Try and breathe. Relax. That's it.
Within 1 month of Keir Starmer taking office, the horrific Southport attack occurred. That prompted spontaneous protests, with some of them turning violent. Now, I in no way condone any of those actions whatsoever by the protesters or rioters, however you want to call them. But I will take this opportunity to show you a quick video of a very unfortunate man at one of those riots. Yeah, I don't think that went how that man thought it was going to go. Anyway, did Keir Starmer step in and calm the situation? No, of course not. Keir Starmer stepped in, called everyone far-right thugs, and immediately started plummeting in the polls. And in steps Lord Hermer, the Attorney General who was recently appointed by Keir Starmer, who's another career human rights lawyer who's built his career of prioritising international law against British interests. A video coming up on him soon on my channel. Hermer then allows sentencing for multiple people who have made online posts, that misguided posts that they shouldn't have made, including Lucy Connolly, a mother of 3, who received a 2-year and 7-month prison sentence for a stupid tweet that she quickly deleted. So within 1 month of entering office, Keir Starmer had alienated large swathes of the British population and had created the potential for future arguments that he's taking political prisoners. I think that was an avoidable political misstep within the first month. So off to a pretty bad start then, 1 month in, not going too well. Another topic that was really a hot topic when Keir Starmer took office, and is still a hot topic to this day, is illegal migration, with illegal migrants crossing the channel and then entering the country, being put up in 4-star hotels, and then committing crimes even, of course. Now, what Keir Starmer said about this, what he promised to do in his manifesto, was smash the gangs. An obviously vacuous statement of intent, or lack thereof. The interesting thing about this whole topic is that Keir Starmer built a career out of defending and basically ring-fencing human rights law globally through the ECHR and our own Human Rights Act of 1998. And then that same human rights law is preventing him from dealing with one of the top topics across British society. Of course, Keir Starmer is failing catastrophically on the topic of illegal migration because of his complete intractability with regard to the application of human rights law, and the fact that he believes that it is sacrosanct and is basically his entire identity built through his career. So a couple of other things to keep in mind on this topic is that Keir Starmer is a very long-term member of the Fabian Society, as I mentioned. And the Fabian Society produced a document which basically calls for the industrialisation of the illegal migration process, hiring over 1,000 staff with career trajectories and moving illegal migrants into British citizenship as soon as possible. And I went into detail on that in the video that I mentioned before, Fabian Society and the Labour Party, on my channel. But I mean, basically, smash the gangs is failing, obviously. So what does Keir Starmer do? Well, he replaces the Home Secretary, used to be Yvette Cooper, and he brings in Shabana Mahmood. Now, Shabana has actually argued for changing the application of the ECHR in the past. And again, I made a video about her on my channel. But basically, I thought at the time, this is either a genius or an absolutely idiotic move, right? Because if Keir Starmer, as an expert human rights lawyer, decided, let's change the ECHR, let's change the way human rights law applies in the UK to illegal migrants, then he would be, well, he's an expert in it, so if anyone can do it, it's him, especially with his buddy Lord Hermer, right? And so I was thinking, well, Shabana Mahmood, she's a Muslim woman, right? And if he's putting her in place and then he's going to clear the way for her to do what she wants to do with regard to human rights law, great, that's really good, because then she'll be seen as, wow, she solved it, and it will help with a lot of the kind of cultural issues we've got with regard to Islam in the UK. So, but no, so far, of course, Keir Starmer has refused to take action on that front, which is what needs to happen. So essentially what he's done is he's taken Shabana, he's put her in this position where she can't solve the problem, and he's basically handcuffed her there and is making her a scapegoat for it. So it turns out to be an incredibly idiotic and actually quite dangerous thing that he's done, in my opinion. And that's Keir Starmer's track record so far on illegal migration. Moving on. Now, despite the fact that the UK tax burden is already extremely high, of course they need more money, right? Need more money in taxes. So how did the Labour Party intend to get that? Well, it's through national insurance. So what they did was they raised the national insurance that's payable by businesses, called employer national insurance, from 13.8 to 15%, right? It means that basically businesses have to pay more per worker they've got toward national insurance. So it's a tax, okay? And what this did was it dropped vacancies in the economy. These vacancies were dropping anyway, but basically it's just continued to drop. So from a peak in 2022, we're now at nearly half the number of total vacancies available in the UK. And in that context of dropping vacancies and lower opportunities for people already here, Keir Starmer, in his infinite wisdom, decided it was a great time to sign a trade deal with India. And within this trade deal with India, there's a provision for temporary workers that are on 3-year contracts over to the UK to not have to pay national insurance themselves. So they, as an individual worker coming to the UK, don't have to pay national insurance. They pay India instead. And any business that hires a worker from India on a 3-year contract doesn't have to pay national insurance either. So hang on, so you're a business, right? And in a lot of IT, and I know because I've worked for a long time in those industries, those businesses will have entities in India. And what they can then do is they can temporarily move workers from India to the UK, and they'll make a saving against hiring people in the UK on a 3-year basis. So they roll in, they roll out, and they just keep it churning, right? And they're making significant savings because it's 15% employer national insurance. Imagine from a business point of view the kind of savings you can get from that. So what that does is it makes British workers uncompetitive systematically in our legislation, right, with this trade deal that we've signed with India. So I mean, it's just bizarre to me. And I found this article that says effectively that there's no new visa spots, right? There's no new visa allocations for India. And Keir Starmer, he said that isn't part of the plans when he was asked about visa expansions. And the visa situation hasn't changed with the free trade agreement. We didn't open up more visas. What are you talking about? Okay, yes, you didn't open up more visas, but that's not how it works. They're uncapped. If you hit certain criteria, certain wages and certain kind of allowances, then you can migrate, right? There's no like, oh, here's India, here's your allocated visa number. Doesn't work like that, yeah? So basically, my opinion is in time, this will be shown that what it results in is cost savings for businesses, right? And just them saving money basically by hiring people from overseas on a temporary rolling basis. And that hurts British workers. It's uncompetitive basically for British workers to be paid so much more because of the national insurance costs. So it's just ridiculous from my point of view, absolutely ridiculous. That situation with India and actually many other countries, but in particular India with regard to this trade deal, is so crazy that I didn't believe it. So I had to fact check it, and I did so 2 or 3 times. And I'm just going to read to you really quickly what I found out about this. So the UK replaced the old Tier 2 general visa with the skilled worker visa system. Under Tier 2, the previous system, there was a quota or a cap, a fixed number of certificates of sponsorship or visas for non-EEA skilled workers. For example, under the old system, Tier 2 route had a cap of $20,700 per year. But the new system, the skilled worker system, the skilled worker visa system, doesn't have a cap. If you meet certain criteria, salary, skill set, various others, then there's no cap. Now let's talk about freedom of speech in the UK, a very hot topic that is being discussed globally, especially across America. They can't believe how crazy our system has become. And this is nicely demonstrated by this mock-up of a UK edition of Monopoly. Anyway, so a couple of issues. Islamophobia. Keir Starmer has implemented an Islamophobia definition within the Labour Party, and that has various different sort of impacts. It means that you can't tie in certain things, you can't criticise certain things about Islam within the Labour Party. And it prevents Keir Starmer from rightly naming and addressing Islamic terror. And I'll provide an example of that later. But along these lines as well is this gradual creeping of blasphemy laws into UK politics. And we can see a Labour MP here calling for implementation of blasphemy laws quite directly in the Houses of Commons. And Keir Starmer responded with this. He said, "I agree that desecration is awful and should be condemned across the House. We are, as I said before, committed to tackling all forms of hatred and division, including Islamophobia in all its forms." Desecration, what do you mean by that? Basically you mean what, insulting a holy book? So what you mean is blasphemy laws? Okay, Keir. But this is a pattern. This is sort of a mode of operation that is typical for Keir Starmer and others like him. So it is an erosion of liberty, and it's kind of in the favour of authoritarian control. Like, we know best because we're morally right, and so you silly citizens don't know what's best for you, so we're going to have to make you be quiet while we make this global utopia for you, right? It's not turning out very well. Anyway, so it wasn't enough, right, this Islamophobia and these blasphemy laws. Of course, they also came out with the Online Safety Act, and I'm aware that this was in the making within the Conservatives, and it was in the making for a long time, but it came out under Keir Starmer, and so a lot of Labour politicians are out there promoting it, right? This is just an absolutely crazy piece of legislation from my perspective. The argument goes, well, children need to be protected from online harms. Of course, a very noble cause, a very noble thing to want to do. You could argue that maybe parents should take care of that, take responsibility for their children and the content that they're consuming. There's a lot of sort of technological solutions for that. You can keep quite tight control over your children's devices. But no, the Labour Party thought the state was better at doing that. And how did they do it? Well, they said, you know what, all of you young people, and actually everybody, British citizens, who want to access some of these maybe slightly shady websites across the darkest corners of the internet, you know what you've got to do? You've got to provide your personal information to those shady actors all the way across the internet. You've now got to provide them with the most personal sensitive data directly. You don't know where it goes, and you've got to do it to everyone that you want to have access to prove your age. Okay, how crazy is this? So it's like the biggest security threat, the biggest security risk that you're legislating that British people now have to adhere to. It's clearly idiotic. And it has direct impact on content creators, because platforms like TikTok, who are already very strict in their content guidelines, are now forcing users to basically not upload content, right? So this is sort of raised by a very popular TikToker called Dylan Page, and he explains that you can go and find his explanation online. But basically what it means is he's now thinking about leaving the UK because he just can't do his work. He can't do his content creation from the UK because of these rules from the Online Safety Act. But it's still not enough. It's still not enough for Keir Starmer. Next, what he wants to do is implement digital IDs. Now, digital IDs will basically be a centralized collection of all of your personal information by the government. Does that sound safe? Does that sound secure? One hack and yeah, there goes all of the British citizens' most sensitive data, right, out to who knows who, right, to Russia, China, who knows. With AI growing, is this a really good idea? I don't think so. Hugely unpopular thing to do, but he's committed to do it, right? And the reason that he said he wants to do it is to curtail illegal migration. If you want to curtail illegal migration, use your human rights prowess, right, as a lawyer, change the human rights law and deal with it that way. Don't deal with it by putting more and more onerous authoritarian control over the British citizens. Again, it's just ridiculous. And as a very quick demonstration of the impact of this Labour's Islamophobia definition, there was a recent Islamic terrorist attack against a synagogue in which a couple of Jews died. And Keir Starmer made a few comments about it, did a little speech, one of his robotic nasal speeches. And in that speech of his, he didn't mention Islam or Islamic terror even once. That's because of the Labour Party adopted definition of Islamophobia. And next up, the Free Palestine movement and the horrific conflict in Gaza. So with this, Keir Starmer has managed to grow the number of people in the UK that he has annoyed. So he's got his, the far right, or basically everyone who's conservative at all, who he's already branded far right and has alienated. And now he wants to go even further, right? So Keir Starmer, he actually did recognise Palestine as a state. But when he did it, he actually, one of the prerequisites for doing so, the UK government said under Keir Starmer, was that a ceasefire had to be agreed upon. But then they went ahead and did it even before the ceasefire agreement was agreed upon. So they recognised Palestine, so that's on one side of the argument. But then at the same time, they continued selling arms to Israel. So bit of both, sitting on the fence a little bit, trying to be everything to everyone, but ending up being nothing to anyone. So, and he did all of this whilst arresting thousands of Free Palestine protesters who are connected to this group that was designated a terror group within that kind of movement overall. Now, whatever you think about that, and I do understand that it's quite a difficult, complicated topic, I'm not sure exactly what the right thing is to do. But But what I would say is that for sure we can say it can't be right to be arresting thousands of protesters who are peaceful protesters for signs that they hold up. That just seems so authoritarian and just wrong. So, find a different solution. And finally, all of this fence sitting and trying to be everything to everyone manifested in a global humiliation on the world stage, I think just yesterday, very recently. So just have a look at this.
Where's the United Kingdom? Where's my friend? Come here. Is everything going good?
Very good.
It's very nice that you're here. These people all came in like 20-minute notice, and I think it's fantastic. And we have so many others, and just so many others.
And just look at his face. Just look at his face afterwards. That's our Prime Minister right there. Not a happy chap. But that's not all. So then Bridget Phillipson, who is currently trying to become the new deputy leader of the Labour Party after the previous deputy of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, resigned in shame due to some tax avoidance or evasion, however you want to put it. Bridget Phillipson, this wannabe deputy Labour Party deputy leader, what she did was she said that the UK played a lead role in achieving the ceasefire. So Trump gets this ceasefire deal done, right? Basically Trump, so of course there's a lot of people involved. I'm not saying the UK wasn't involved at all, but did we play a leading role? Well, Israel doesn't say that we played a leading role. Actually, that was debunked, and you can see that here. It was also debunked by one of Trump's top aides. And after all of that, Keir Starmer then comes out and he says that the recognition of Palestine was a key step in the achievement of that ceasefire deal. I don't know about that. And all of this at all times done with the charisma of a beige wet flannel. I mentioned it before, but have you ever noticed that Keir Starmer talks through his nose like a robot, like a nasal robot? And it's not just Keir Starmer who does this, it's also Rachel Reeves, Ed Miliband. It seems to be spreading like a nasal robotic virus. So maybe it's a Fabian Society thing, I don't know. Anyway, I will speak down to you through my nose. That seems to be a pattern of behaviour that he has adopted. Now, he's driving the country culturally and economically into oblivion, effectively, and all done with this sense of moral superiority. It's like this moral and intellectual superiority of, I know what's best for you. And it's just so difficult to bear. But anyway, right, let's cut him some slack. What has he done well? I think that he's managed a potentially very difficult relationship with Donald Trump very well. Seems to get on with him well, and so well done there, kudos. And also, we signed a pretty good trade deal with the United States, better than other countries for sure. I think probably the best in the world. How much Keir Starmer played into that, I don't know, but let's give him credit. If we're going to blame him for all the bad stuff, let's give him credit. But I really thought about it, right? There's a whole host of other things. There's, free school meal stuff. There's stuff on various different topics, okay? But this video is about how did he become so unpopular? So I'm intentionally focusing on the negative. There are good things. Maybe in a future video, if enough people comment that I need to balance it out, as is sometimes the case, then maybe I'll make one on all the good stuff that he's done. Also, let's face the facts, right? Let's face reality. So Keir Starmer is operating within quite a uniquely and historically difficult time. Of course, there's a lot of difficult times in history, don't get me wrong. Actually, an argument can be made this is quite an easy time relative to the past. But there are certainly headwinds. There are things that make the current environment difficult, especially in context of the last few decades. So, Elon Musk buying X and then making it a free speech platform, it means that people can talk more openly until they're sort of controlled by the Online Safety Act or whatever new stuff Keir Starmer's got cooking. But basically it means that, we do see this kind of, these echo chambers forming to a certain degree on both the left and the right, and in other ways, in many other ways as well, yeah? So that is the case, that, it's a new kind of phenomena that's happening. My opinion is that people are getting access to a lot more information they didn't have before. You don't have to go through a mediator, right? There's two sides to that. Yeah, you can get immediate access to experts, and you can get immediate access to information that is valid, and you can see the truth that you couldn't see before. Certainly is the case for me. But on the flip side of that, you have to do your fact checking, because you can very easily become convinced by misinformation. So it's really important that you do that fact checking. Anyway, so that's something that's happening, that the current government has to contend with, that is almost definitely contributing to the levels of unpopularity that we're seeing. Some other things, Brexit happened recently, basically a constitutional crisis almost, a very severe kind of political thing that's occurring. Whether you like it or not, it's something that's happening. And then we had Boris Johnson with the Boris wave, a huge amount of migration that came toward the end of Boris Johnson's term in office. And then we had COVID-19, lest we forget, right? That lab-grown virus, okay, cut me some slack. So likely escape from lab virus. Now remember, wasn't it interesting? We weren't allowed to say that it was a pangolin or a bat, or the pangolin and a bat somehow, and then whatever. Even though there was a Wuhan coronavirus lab in Wuhan, and then we had the Wuhan virus. Anyway, I won't go on. But yeah, so we had that very recently. That caused a huge amount of debt. You had, you had the furlough and all that kind of stuff, and so we've got a lot of debt, right? Then you've also got the Ukraine conflict that's happening, and also the Gaza conflict, which is just horrific. Both Ukraine and Gaza horrific. So these things are happening. Then as a result of all of this, we've got high inflation. We had periods of high inflation, high bond yields. So we're in an economic environment that's incredibly difficult, that's been sort of brewing for at least a decade. And then, in line with that, like stagnant real term wages since 2016 at least. So it's not like it all just happened now. It's just that Keir Starmer's in the hot seat, right? And my view is basically, well, you're in the hot seat, things are going wrong. You've got to be bold, you've got to take action. You can't just bureaucratically manage through, and kind of be this middle management administrator and just kind of will get there like a robot. You've actually got to have principles. You got to stick to them, and you got to argue for them, and you got to be bold, and you got to implement them. And speaking of principles, what are Keir Starmer's principles? What are the Labour Party's principles, other than let's just kind of carry on and try to make things a little bit better? So it's really difficult to actually put your finger on it, and for what I came up with a little list here, and these aren't really principles. Okay, look, if I had to say what Keir Starmer's principles really is, what his priority really is, it's internationalism, as expressed in his comments on Davos, as expressed in his career as a human rights lawyer, and everything kind of stems from that. His approach to legal migration, to free trade deals, to everything, it's all international. I think that, he is very anti-nation state. He's very anti-nation state, and so that means he's very kind of anti anybody who expresses patriotism and a strong cultural identity as a nation. He's trying to redefine what Britain and being British means, so that it applies to these high-level international kind of vague statements around human rights and stuff like that. So I came up with a quick list when I was thinking through this. These are like anti-principles actually, but this is just what I came up with. Anti-British, he's authoritarian, so it's like authoritarian socialism, gradual creep, Fabian Society style, creep toward authoritarianism. Just need a little bit more power, just a little bit more and a little bit more to implement our plan that you really hate, but we want to do it anyway because we know better than you, and we're better than you morally. Anti-liberalism, prioritizes international law, anti-free speech, clearly. You even see that kind of coming through the police and what they choose to I'm not going to blame all that on Keir Starmer, but it is kind of setting a tone. And basically, like, I get the sense he feels like he knows better. He feels like he has this moral superiority, and that's why he's not shy of coming out and labeling people fascists and far right, because he really feels like he knows better. But it's super divisive. So he's divided everyone up, alienated everyone, right? And then he's become the least popular prime minister in British history ever. So yeah. And another thing I'd say about him, right, that really stands out to me is he looks scared. He looks afraid. He looks like he's totally out of his depth. He looks like he's fallen into he's fallen into the sea and has literally fallen all the way down into the Mariana Trench. Now reality is just collapsing in on him, you know, with huge pressure. And my natural response to that is I feel sympathy, I feel compassion, you know, I feel sorry for him. I don't want to have to feel like that about our Prime Minister. You know, I shouldn't be looking at him and going, oh no, like a combination of cringe and this desire to protect him. I mean, that's how I feel, right? So I don't think that's a good kind of perspective that you want your citizens to have. And I think a lot of people feel like that. So I finished this video and then I went to go and edit the video, had a quick look on X, and I saw that Labour have plummeted to the lowest ever poll ratings in history. So look at this, Labour on 15 points, equal with the Green Party, and Reform on more than double either of them. So add them together and you don't get to Reform's level right now. So that makes the context of this video even more kind of important. So I thought I'd come and add that. All right, so now this last a couple of statements, right? This is just my opinion, and it's just like, okay, if I was going to talk to Keir Starmer and tell him what to do, the thing is, I want to tell him get off the fence, right? Have principles. But the problem is that his principles that he has, as soon as he starts to get off the fence, he comes in and says something like in his recent conference speech. And it's all like, you're just all far right, we're going to attack, we're going to fight, we're going to fight you. And it's like, if he's principled and he really puts it into action, it's just anti-British, basically. So, and like unnecessarily so. So I'll leave that. Don't just come off the fence, right, and act on your principles. Actually, I think maybe your principles have to change. Look, on the left, you've got this rising, the Green Party are rising. And of course, a lot of that is environmentalism and some other stuff. I did a video on Zach Polanski. But basically, like, one really hot topic is wealth inequality, right? And like the billionaires and the top 1%. And you see like Gary Stevenson talking about this all the time. I don't think it adds up actually if you want to tax that. But anyway, right, if he wanted to start to bring people back from that side, we'll do some stuff on wealth taxes. Maybe normalise capital gains tax with income tax. Maybe try to do something. I'm not exactly sure what. I think they're going to, by the way, in the November budget. I wouldn't be surprised, because in all the Fabian Society documents I read, they spoke about some of this stuff. So don't be surprised if they do some of that. But then on the other side, right? So on the other side of the debate, so a lot of the rise on the left is that, and then rises on the right a lot about migration. And it's gone quite far, but you know, if you want to take a big dent out of that, just go really hard on illegal migration. Just completely combat it, and you've got the expertise. You're a human rights lawyer. You know this stuff inside out. You've got Lord Hermer. You guys are like the dream team if you wanted to implement changes to human rights law. Leave the ECHR, and then implement a new Human Rights Act, right, within the UK that that was not, you know, that protected rights with a prioritisation for British citizens. But they won't do that. They don't want to do that because their entire being, their entire character, their entire self is built on this principle of the sacrosanct this international human rights law is. They're globalists, basically, right down to the core. So they won't do it. And here's my warning. If you don't, well, you better get ready for Nigel Farage to come in, with Reform to come in, or maybe something even further extreme on the right to come in and to just tear it all to shreds. because that will happen. So if you want it to at least be workable and to take account of some of the other things that are in there you think are worth protecting, well, now's the time to do it, because if you don't, well, someone's going to do it for you, and they're probably going to do it in a way that you really don't like. Lastly, I do think Keir Starmer is genuinely a good person at heart. I just think that he's the wrong person at the wrong time, and you know, I think he means well ultimately, but he's just very misguided in a very deep level on his principles from my perspective. And maybe that would have worked, 20 years ago, but not now. Anyway, we're locked into him. We're locked into him for the foreseeable future. Will he leave? Who will he be replaced by? I don't know. I can't really see anyone. I dread to think, frankly. I would put my money on it being a Fabian, given the chances that I'm right being very high. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much to all my subscribers, by the way. Anyone who engages on my videos, I really appreciate it. If you liked it, subscribe. If you liked the video, like it. Thank you so much. Until next time, cheers.